We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and forget this. We'll do it the hard way. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my nemesis, Agent Andrew Williams. How are we doing today, Andrew?
You know.
Yeah, insightful. Thank you for that. I feel like we've caught up now since last week whenever we got to sit down and talk movies. Here we are again, Andrew. I gotta say, speaking of catching up, I have caught up on Cobra Kai. I finished, I'm up to date, I guess. So I'm to season 6, which I've divided into 3 parts. The first 5 episodes are out. Yeah, and then they release 5 more episodes in November, and then the last 5 episodes to be determined sometime in 2025. So they're really, every season's been 10 episodes up until now. This last one's 15 episodes, and like I said, releasing it in 3 stages. What are you doing, Netflix? We had a good thing going with TV, 1 episode a week. Like, that's still the best way to release your TV shows. I know you're all about binging, but like, give me all the episodes or do it weekly. This segmented thing is not it, I gotta say. But as far as the show goes, it's so good. It's certainly one of my favorite shows of the streaming era. I think it maintained its high quality throughout. I've got, like some seasons more than others, but like such a large cast of characters that are all 3-dimensional. The choreography and fight scenes are awesome, and they're shot so well with wide shots. You can clearly see everything that's going. You can tell it's actually them doing it. The drama is great. The camp is great. I love everything about the show. I can't wait for it to return.
Cool, man.
Now you got to catch up.
I
so
do.
You can wait with me.
Yeah, I watched through, seasons 2 or 3. I don't remember, but I definitely have not seen the last couple of seasons, which it's not for any other reason except the fact that it requires me to sit down and watch it, and that's tough. Just easier to watch the same stuff again and again and again. But the reception I've heard is so the fact that it's still going strong and still of high quality is dang impressive. So I'll see if I get there.
You mentioned before we officially started recording that you have recently rewatched The Fall Guy, a movie that I know is a recent favorite of yours and probably fits under that comfort watch category
100%.
now. But have you watched anything new? Been to the theaters? Anything new?
I did see Beetlejuice. I don't know if we talked about that.
Okay, yeah, I saw that one too.
It was fine. It was good to see the characters back. Obviously Michael Keaton as Beetlejuice is just, it's good to see. I love, we've spoken of our love for Michael Keaton immensely on this podcast.
Greatest actor of all time, yeah.
I did actually go see Vertigo in 70mm yesterday.
Now that's awesome.
Is
there like a dedicated theater? Like, what screen do you need to display 70mm?
So you can do 70mm is the film itself. You can do that on any screen, really.
But it's a tall aspect ratio, right?
It depends on what it is. 70mm. I mean, 35mm is your standard. So it's the widescreen. It's usually a widescreen ratio.
Okay.
But I like the theater I see it in shows 35mm stuff. They show regular stuff. They show everything. It's Music Box Theater in the city. I think it's around Lakeview, not too far from Wrigley Field. So it's a pain in the ass to get to for the short version. But especially yesterday with Mexican Independence Day tends to be a very boisterous celebration in the city. There was a whole lot of places locked off for block parties and stuff too. So going into the city yesterday was actually a terrible idea, but seeing the movie was great. Music Box actually just went through a huge renovation. I think they're 95. It's a 95-year-old movie theater. They redid all the seats, put in cup holders. They redid all the carpets, put in new aisle lighting. It really went all out. The original kind of archway they had somebody restore it. So they really put in some work for the 95th birthday to make it look really nice. And so yesterday was the first time I'd seen it since they did that. Because when I saw North by Northwest in 70 millimeter, it was before. And yeah, it's way nicer, but it's definitely a very classic movie theater. No stadium seats, no reclining, no anything. But they got Mr. Pibb at the snack stand. So basically, it's my favorite theater of all time. But Vertigo 70 millimeter was just super cool. I mean, you and I have talked about Vertigo before. If somebody said it was the greatest movie of all time, I would be very fine with that description. It's me. I say that. But
is that legit number one for you? So for me, you're taking a drink, so I'll just keep talking. I've got my list of like personal favorite movies. Vertigo's up there, but if I were to try to make an objective list, which is futile, that's not how you should view art. But yeah. If I were to try to look at it objectively, I probably put Vertigo number one.
Yep.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you asked me, like I said, if you're asking me to pick a single movie that I think showcases acting, cinematography, shot composition, story,
the use of color in that movie is so good. I remember like freaking out when I got the 4K. Like I was sending you pictures on my phone. I'm like, dude, look at this. So I can only imagine like seeing it in 70 millimeter.
And so this is the 97 restore that they done up, because I think we talked about this a little bit when I mentioned going to see North by Northwest and The Searchers, which I saw there before. I saw those on the same day a couple months back. All of these, people are asking, like, well, how do you take a movie from the 50s and put it into widescreen, let alone 70 millimeter? And all of these movies were shot in VistaVision, which was basically widescreen 35 millimeter, for lack of like a more technical explanation. It was a bigger frame. It was a bigger shot that you could still put on 35 millimeter film. So Hitchcock ended up shooting like all of his late stage stuff on VistaVision. And John Ford with The Searchers and a couple of others did. So The Searchers actually, like, you've got these sweeping landscapes out in the desert in West Texas and things like that. And it's just these gorgeous looking shots that fill up the whole screen. Like, not just, like you said, your standard, 4x3, whatever you want to call it, but just taking the whole widescreen image and filling it with these landscapes. And with Vertigo, using like the architecture of San Francisco, the way they're doing all of that with all the different pieces, I was just, my eyes are just looking at the whole screen, trying to see everything that I could. And you mentioned that 4K, like when they go into Ernie's, that restaurant they keep going into with like the
that
red
wallpaper,
walls, like,
yeah,
just boom, it just flies off the screen, and it was just unbelievable.
The wallpaper, the red door, the green neon glow, that scene in the apartment.
In the apartment, even his like nightmare sequence, like the way they pulled that all off. That was like 56, 58 when they made Vertigo.
Crazy.
Like it, like that kind of sequence of him having like the nightmare after he thinks that Madeline's been killed. Like, I was like, dude, this is unbelievable for that time period to look that good. Like, it's such a wild swing too, because there's like the full on animated segments of it. Like, it's this full on like serious like Alfred Hitchcock, drama thriller that has this like insane like fever dream thrown in the middle of it, and it's insane how good it looks even now. Like you said, the use of color, the use of lighting, and it's funny because Hitchcock apparently wasn't the biggest fan of it after it came out, because apparently audiences weren't really the biggest fan of it, because they didn't apparently buy 50-year-old Jimmy Stewart hooking up with 25-year-old Kim Novak, which, well, all right, okay.
Some things change and some things don't in Hollywood.
And, yeah, and so, like, and, Kim Novak is still around. She just doesn't act anymore, but she's like 91. But it was funny. There's a series of interviews that Hitchcock did with Francois Truffaut. There's a book just called Hitchcock Truffaut, or there's a movie of it too. But it's just this French filmmaker interviewing Hitchcock. And they get to Vertigo, and Alfred Hitchcock just described it very simply as it's a story about Jimmy Stewart trying to have sex with a dead woman. And
it's the greatest movie of all time.
It is.
Go figure.
Go figure. And like I was watching it yesterday, and the one thing that sat in my brain is I was like, man, this really is like a Descent into Madness movie, isn't it? Like the second half of that movie, you basically are like watching, like he cracks the mystery, but like all the process of what he does to Judy, and then the whole segment that leads to the finale, like that's just that dude basically losing his mind. And I was like, I never really thought of the movie from that perspective because I just watched, or I've just bought Black Narcissus, which is another one I've heard of as being like a good Descent into Madness movie. And I'm like, yeah, the second half of this movie, you basically watch Jimmy Stewart just come completely unglued. And that was just an interesting ripple that, I mean, I definitely watched it and processed that, but I'd never connected those dots before. But yeah, just really great. Just 10 out of 10, no notes.
Andrew, some people might describe the movie we're talking about today as a Descent into Madness, but for very different reasons. Because each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release, and we challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It is 0% month, and this week we are talking the 2002 film Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever. Andrew, they finally face each other. Ecks and Sever, this is the movie where they come face to face. We've been waiting for it for so long. Andrew, what is your history with this movie? Have you seen it before? Have you revisited it before this week for the podcast?
I have not revisited it, but I saw this in theaters.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
I had some friends that this came out. We'll talk about it a little more. It came out in 2002. So this was my sophomore year of high school. Yeah, I think so. Maybe my freshman year. I don't know. I graduated in 2005. So yeah, this would have been my sophomore year of high school. I had some friends that were just like, hey man, we want to go to the movies. And I was like, oh, what do you want to see? And like, we're going to see Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever. And I was like, huh. I remember this conversation with my dad because I went to my dad. I was like, hey, my friends want to go watch this movie, Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever. And my dad was like, huh, what's it rated? And I remember saying it was rated R. And my friend on the phone went, Andrew, you don't tell your dad it's rated R. And so he kind of looked at it. He's like, all right, whatever. Like at that point, I'd watched like RoboCop and Alien and stuff like that. He was like, whatever, who cares? But so I went and saw it in theaters, and there are glimpses in my brain of that movie, flashes, but overall, not a whole lot of it stuck around, and I can't tell you that I've revisited it ever until this moment.
Do you remember, like, walking out of the theater? Did you and your friends talk about it? Was anybody high on it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I outside like a base level high school. Oh wow, the action was kind of cool, but no, I don't recall there being an impression whatsoever.
Interesting. Andrew, I gotta say, I have always wanted to watch this movie. I've never seen it. Watching it for this podcast, first time I ever watched it. But I remember the marketing. I remember it coming out. I remember the poster. And I remember that cover, VHS or DVD box art, like in Blockbuster, and just seeing it all the time and just being really intrigued. And like, I knew it bombed. I knew it wasn't well received. I didn't necessarily think it would be good, but it looked interesting. It looked, I'll be honest, like I thought this was like a sci-fi movie just based on the name and that cool cover with like Antonio Banderas and Lucy Liu. They're back to back. He's holding up the gun. It's called Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever. Ecks is spelled all weird. I thought for sure this was sci-fi. You know, it gives you like the Matrix vibes, which had come out a few years before. They're wearing like black leather on that cover. I thought that until I watched the movie this week, and I watched it. I'm like, oh, this is not a sci-fi film whatsoever. There's a small, little plot point that's kind of futuristic, but really I would not classify this as sci-fi at all. It's not at all what I expected, but it looked stylish as hell. So like, I just wanted to see it for that reason. And yeah, like I said, I knew the reputation. It's very infamous. 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. We'll get to it in a minute, but I was not prepared. Andrew, let's jump into it. This movie releases September 20th of 2002. It's made on a budget of $70 million, although there's an asterisk next to that. We'll come back to it. At the box office, it only brings in $20.2 million. Andrew, $20 million. And you and your friends are among that 20 million. You are part of an elite club, my friend.
We are indeed.
Critically, it's absolutely panned by critics. It holds a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes, and that is based on 119 critic reviews. We've been talking...
Not a small sample size.
0% movies all month. Most of them you're looking at between 20 and 40 reviews. Most of them were released before Rotten Tomatoes was a thing. This, I don't know if Rotten Tomatoes was around in 2002, but we're well into the internet era. Social media is right around the corner. Online reviews are a thing. So this is a much larger sample size. It is the most reviews for any movie with a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. The only one over 100 reviews that still has a 0%, not a single positive review from a critic. You could make the case that this is the worst reviewed movie of all time. There's an argument to be made there. It is certainly among the worst reviewed, especially when you think about like a Hollywood film or theatrical release film. You start getting into lower budgets or B movies or things that don't get theatrical release, you can probably find some pretty horrifying stuff. But as far as a movie on this scale, worst reviewed, I was very disappointed though to see that the audience score is 20%, which is still abysmal. But like, come on guys, we could have had a 00. We could have had 0% based on 10,000 plus reviews, but people just weren't cool enough to keep that going.
No, so yeah, by comparison, the most reviews any other movie we have discussed this month had was 30. Wagons East and Problem Child both had 30 critic reviews. Highlander 2 had 25. Oddly enough, of all the movies we have reviewed this month, this also has the lowest audience score.
Wow.
Based off of it says 10,000 plus ratings. Highlander has 23, Problem Child has 42, and Wagons East has 33. So not just a poor critic review, but like you said, that is 119 reviews. That is the most. I'm sure there are movies with very low scores that have that many reviews, but there are none with 0%. So like you said, this is arguably, at least as far as Rotten Tomatoes goes, the lowest, probably the worst reviewed movie in existence. Of the website. The website does exist in 98. I don't know quite when they start really getting into the business of the aggregate scores. I feel like that's more of like the last 15 years or so that really like took off and became like a thing. I remember buying, I think it was X-Men First Class on Blu-ray, and it had a certified fresh sticker on the slipcase.
Yeah. That
really took off and became a thing. But yeah, it is a no one was going to bat for this. I do not believe there's been any real critical reevaluation of it, and it doesn't feel like anybody's lining up for that special edition 4K.
It's funny how God, that really takes me back. Seeing a certified fresh sticker on DVDs, I remember first seeing those, being like, really, people care about that? Like, not that anything against Rotten Tomatoes. Like, I just felt like, as a movie guy, I knew what it was, but now it's like becoming mainstream or a metric that people look at, by being used in marketing. And then I remember like trailers would be like TV spots would be like, it's the number one movie in America, used to be what it says, but now it's like certified fresh and Rotten Tomatoes was like a talking point. And then I remember Super Mario Bros. Movie was the first one I remember touting the audience score in its marketing. It's like 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, because the critic score of that movie is not great, but they push specifically the audience score.
I feel like The Rock is a person that really dialed in on using the audience score as the metric. Because he always, like The Rock, back when
he doesn't make movies for critics, Andrew. It's not for the critics, for the fans, for the people.
I can't, because critics aren't people, man. They're not humans. They're not people. No, I realize that Rotten Tomatoes is not the end all be all. I feel like there has been a pushback against it more recently, where people are trying to like really kind of buck the idea that, you know, we should take a movie and boil it down to a single score. But even now, like take something like Fall Guy that got generally pretty solid word of mouth. I think the Rotten Tomato scores in the high 70s or 80s. Still flopped. Like, so it's this
Furiosa, also very well reviewed.
Didn't do well. And so there's been this kind of pushback recently against like Rotten Tomatoes. Obviously there was that story about the gaming of the reviews on that one particular Daisy Ridley movie that's gone from the website, but I do think that story is... My stance is essentially the same as it's always been, is that if it were as simple as the studios buying good reviews, every movie would have good reviews.
They got the money to put.
Like if
they got the marketing budget.
Ant-Man and Quantumania, Ant-Man 3, Eternals, none of those would be rotten if it was as simple as the studio just buying good reviews. So, and then again, the flip side of it is that we're now seeing good reviewed movies that still aren't succeeding successfully, which I think is more indicative of the issues that the studios inadvertently threw onto the theatrical, to the movie theaters rather, by going so hard on streaming, which I remember the article I read a couple months ago that was like, studios didn't think they were going to mess it up this badly. And the first one I saw was like, oh no, the consequences of our own actions. But I don't know if you've seen I Think You Should Leave with Tim Robinson.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the one where he's in the hot dog costume and he crashes the hot dog cart into the store.
Yeah.
And basically, my friend sent me the gif. He's like, the movie execs are basically Tim Robinson in that sketch. We're all just trying to find out who did this. Like, you know, not realizing, oh no, are we the baddies? But so it's been interesting, kind of looking back, and obviously, like we mentioned with these older movies, it's definitely a tougher thing to kind of really whittle it down into the good and the bad reviews, especially when the sample size is so limited. But I was shocked to see how many reviews this movie had. I was actually kind of, and I guess part of that is probably due to its legacy. I don't know how many of those are like historical versus like, you know, more recent, but I definitely would assume that at least some of them are definitely people that were like, wow, I got to check this out. And then watched it and were like, woof. So
let's take a look at the creative team. There's a bit to parse out here. There's only one credited screenwriter, that is Alan B. McElroy. Now, he is known for writing Halloween 4 before this, as well as Rapid Fire, which is probably the most high-profile thing Brandon Lee did outside of The Crow, and Spawn. So,
alum of the show.
After this, would go on to write Wrong Turn, The Marine, Tekken. So we will probably be talking about him again, #PP. Also, some pretty successful credits in the TV world, like the original 21 Jump Street, The Vampire Diaries, and more recently, Star Trek Discovery. Now, what's strange about this is he's getting the sole credit because he wrote the original spec script for this way back in the late 80s. At that time, there was a movie called Legion, and it was about an ex-LA cop who's called in to help track down a rogue CIA agent codenamed Legion, and that guy goes on a killing spree, so the cop has to come track him down. Dolph Lundgren is considered in early talks of this movie. It gets stuck in developmental hell, reemerges at the end of the 90s, now it's called Ecks versus Sever, but largely the same plot, and they're looking at possibly casting Wesley Snipes and Jet Li, which sounds awesome. I would love to see them two face off. Sylvester Stallone and Vin Diesel are another pair that is considered. The eventual director, who we'll talk about, wanted to use Chow Yun-Fat and Jean Reno. Also a cool pairing that I never would have thought. That all sounds great. But this is clearly a plot where it's too, you know, it's good guy hunting down bad guy. Like it's Ecks versus Sever. It makes sense at this point. #PP. But the thing is, there's a big rewrite by Peter M. Linkov. Now, he, for whatever reason, does not get any credit on the final draft, even though he largely changed the story. He introduces this nanobot technology device. He changes the character of Sever to a woman. And at the end, there's very little in common with that original script. But again, only our original writer is getting credit. I'm not too sad about it because Peter M. Linkov has revealed himself to be a pretty terrible person and had some pretty high-profile gigs as an executive producer or showrunner for like CSI New York and Hawaii Five-0. I think the new MacGyver he was involved with. But in 2020, he's fired from everything after numerous reports come out about his abusive and toxic work environment behavior. But worth noting that he rewrote this but didn't receive credit, even though he largely changed the story. And it's no longer Ecks versus Sever in plot, in name only. It's a weird, convoluted history the writing of this film has.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a 15-year plus process from that original spec script to the finish line. And so, as a writer, it's got to be cool to see something that you wrote, that long ago, finally get to see the light of day. But like you said, it was changed heavily. It's, went from a variety of different studios, a variety of different places. And then, at the 11th hour, it gets kind of changed completely into a whole different thing. So it is an odd thing. Yeah.
The movie is directed by Chaos. K-A-O-S. That is what the opening credits tell us. It's directed by Chaos itself. That is just a pseudonym for the director, Witch Kayasayanada. I'm doing my best to pronounce his entire name, but it's often credited either the pseudonym Chaos or Witch Chaos. He shortens his name professionally. And he has been interviewed about this movie since then and its, infamous status, and revealed a number of things, like the edit was taken away from him. This is not his final cut. He claims that he actually never saw the finished product. He was so upset with the studios taking the project away from him, which we've said on the show many times. That sucks. We never like to see when a director doesn't get to finish carrying out their vision. But another claim that he made was that the budget was actually only $35 million, and that the studios inflated the budget for nefarious reasons to pay less royalties and pay out people's points less, which the studio is responsible for a number of other films, and Battlefield Earth being one of them, which they were actually taken to court for doing just that, inflating the budget, and found guilty in that case. So there's some credibility to his claims there, and hashtag PP, I don't mean this as an insult, this feels and looks more like a $35 million movie versus a $70 million movie. So that all checks out for me.
Yeah, it sounds about right. Obviously, the infamous Hollywood math. That's the end. The talk about the Forrest Gump, probably another big high profile instance where the writer of the book sold the rights with part of the understanding and the deal being that he was going to get profits from the film. And despite that movie making, I don't know, Chris, what did Forrest Gump make at the global box office? Let's find out. It made upwards of
$600 million is my guess worldwide.
$678 million.
All right, I was in the ballpark. It was pretty close.
So Winston Groom was paid $350K for the screenplay rights and contracted for a 3% share of the film's net profits. Now, obviously, that's the key there, because that basically says you get 3% of what when the movie becomes profitable, you get 3% of everything that it makes. So the idea is simply that once the movie recoups all of its costs first, then you get 3% of everything else. So, hypothetically, you make a $500 million movie, everything with budgeting and effects and marketing and everything, say it's $200 million, that's $300 million of net profit. He would have gotten 3% of that, which is $9 million. Now, Forrest Gump claimed to have only cost $55 million. Now, despite it only costing $55 million and making $678 million, the studio basically told him it didn't make money. They basically suggest that the movie even lost money.
That's why they had to open up all those Bubba Gump shrimp restaurants, Andrew. They're just trying to make some money off of this thing.
Tom Hanks, by contrast, apparently contracted for a % share of the film's gross receipts, that means you get paid percentage of whatever it makes, excluding profits. And he and Zemeckis apparently both got like $40 million. And so it's another thing where you could argue the studio kind of knew what they were doing. They definitely were gaming the system against him, and they do eventually resolve that in a way, partly by paying him 7+ figures for the rights to his Forrest Gump sequel that they never made. So anyway, Hollywood math, it's a big thing. They basically will take a movie and basically, no matter how much money it makes, they will find a way to say that it wasn't profitable. This is so they can avoid royalties, something that's been coming up big in the streaming era. It's so they can avoid things like this, where, people are contracted for gross profit. It's basically a way for them to cheat people because, like, if the guy says, yeah, I want net profits, they can be like, yes, sure, net profits. And then they know they can just game the system and say it never made net profits. So it's an unfortunate thing. So I would not be shocked at all if a studio that already got busted for that, in this case with Battlefield Earth, probably did the same thing here.
As for this director's other work, before this has a somewhat high-profile movie called Fa. It releases in 1998. It is a Thai film. And I say somewhat high-profile because it had a notoriously large budget, but failed at the Thai box office. So it wasn't exactly a hit. How this director ends up directing Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever, which, for all intents and purposes, is a Hollywood film. It is co-financed amongst different countries, but it's a high-profile release in America. I don't know. I don't know how he gets tapped for that because, like I said, the one movie under his belt is not financially successful. Does Ballistic, and obviously it has the legacy that it does. Most other movies in his filmography are going to be Thai films. Not a lot I'm familiar with or heard of. Tekken 2, Kazuya's Revenge, I know just because I'm familiar with Tekken, but I don't remember that particular movie coming out. He does a movie called Zero Tolerance in 2015 that stars action star Scott Adkins, and that's maybe the only reason I would have heard about that. But otherwise, looking up and down these movies, not really anything high profile or breakout before or after this film.
Not particularly, no. He does have some credits as the director of photography. He's got some where he's just the cinematographer, so he kind of does a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, I don't quite know how this all comes together. It probably was this kind of thing where, I don't know, like you think about like the more modern theory, which was somebody would make like a big hit independent film and then some large studio would grab them for their blockbuster film. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the action piece of it. They thought he was really good at the action piece, but who knows, man?
Andrew, I think it's time we jump into this movie. Talk about everything we like, all the good stuff about Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever. You ready for this?
Thanks for joining us, folks. Appreciate it.
When the son of DIA director Robert Gant is kidnapped by an ex-agent named Sever, FBI agent Jeremiah Ecks is brought out of retirement to get him back. Ecks is promised that his wife, whom he believes was killed, is actually alive, and her whereabouts will be revealed to him if he captures Sever. This proves to be difficult as Sever has been trained as an assassin since childhood, and the situation grows even more complicated when Ecks discovers that his wife, Rain, is actually Richard Gant's wife, now named Vin, and the kidnapped child is actually his own biological son. Sever reveals that her own child was killed, and she only kidnapped Gant's son to protect him because Richard injected the boy with a nanobot weapon capable of inducing a heart attack to whoever it infects.
Oh my god!
I think I rounded it all up there. Now, most of that information is doled out throughout the film, but this is for a movie called Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever. This is way more complicated than I expected. I thought like the rival assassins hunting each other down. That is all I expected from this movie, and honestly, it's not even that. As I was alluding to earlier, this isn't really Ecks versus Sever. This is like Ecks and Sever versus Gant. This is like I don't know. It's a heck of a thing, Andrew.
It is a heck of a thing. Indeed. No, like literally, you describing that plot to me is like, it's literally like some guys like, what if we had two assassins fight each other? It's like, yeah. And what if one kidnaps the other somebody's kid? And it's like, yeah. What if it turns out that that person's kid also died? It's like, oh, and then what if the other assassin's wife is dead? Oh, but what if she's also not dead? And it's like, oh, but also what if there's a
situation?
What if there's a nanobot whole thing going on? It's like, it's literally like they just kept like, we're like, it's like the worst improv class ever. Yes, and like just continuing on and on. It's like, and then the assassins team up. Yes, and then it turns out.
Before we jump into this plot and the scenes, Andrew, we got to talk about the cast of this film. And of course, we're going to start with the best casting and best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the Call of Duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off. Who will be getting your Mark Strong Award for Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever?
I'm gonna be going with, it's an interesting choice because he is neither the titular Ecks or Sever. I'll actually be going with Greg Henry as Robert Gant slash agent. He has another name, I forget what it is. Anyway, I'm going with him. He's FBI agent Clark. When he stages all of the nonsense, and then he's a DIA director, Robert Gant. Anyway,
got it.
He is the child that is kidnapped at the beginning of the film is presumed to be his, and he is essentially our villain of the piece. He is played by Greg Henry, who you know from such films as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 as Peter's grandfather, as well as a bevy of other James Gunn associated films like Slither and Super and things like that. He was a body double, a movie you and I both love. He plays.
I'm waiting for that 4K come the end of this month.
He's great in that. He won't spoil any more about what he does there, because
he's the guy that rents that. We didn't rent it out. He's
the guy that
our main character is house sitting his house.
Yes.
And he points him in the right direction. How about that?
Yeah, but it's why he points him in the right direction. That's the question.
Okay. We won't spoil
Anyway, just a great character actor all over television as well. You look any number of television shows he's guest starred on, and here he is. He's actually been in 6 De Palma films. Brian De Palma films, used him a lot, and then so he had Brian De Palma and then jumped onto the James Gunn train. So the man's doing all right for himself. But
good work if he can get it.
It is. But anyway, He's playing like a real piece of garbage here. And he's very comfortable at it. He is leaning into it at every turn. He is kind of chewing what scenery he does get, which is not a whole lot, to be fair. But what I'm thinking of performances in this movie that actually feel a little bit more natural, his is the one that kept coming to mind. There's the scene towards the end where like it's the final kind of showdown with him and our main characters, and he's hashtag PP. I think he's the only one that looks like comfortable in his skin, but just leaning into what he's doing, kind of really just relishing being a real piece of garbage. Not the biggest role, not a lot of screen time, but when he's there, he's making sure that he leaves a mark. So Greg Henry joining the illustrious hall.
Andrew, this is a good pick, and I guess not a surprising one coming from you. You love your villains. I would love to see the stats on that, on how often your Mark Strong Award is going to the villain of the piece. But it's just like in pro wrestling, like heels get to have more fun. So I get it. I think this is a good pick. I'm going to go somewhere else. And look, I'm not going to besmirch the gravitas of the Mark Strong Award, but sometimes we have a Mark Strong Award where it might be particularly passionate about it. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, who I think we've done multiple times. It's like, we gotta award this guy. Or sometimes there's a really obvious Mark Strong Award pick, like Raul Julia in Street Fighter. Like, who else could we possibly give it to? Sometimes we gotta dig a little deeper to find who's standing out and why, if you will. Andrew, my Mark Strong Award today is going to be going to Lucy Liu as the titular Sever. In my summation, I mean, Ecks and Sever, they're in the title. They're in most scenes. They get the lion's share of the work. I think it comes down to them for me. And then beyond that, I just got to ask myself, who is more convincing in the role they're giving? Is it Ecks? Is it Antonio Banderas, who's sad guy? Or is it Lucy Liu as badass assassin? And you know what? I'm buying Lucy Liu as badass assassin. I think she looks great in the action scenes. She's got the skin tight leather look that I alluded to earlier. She gets to show off a lot of her martial arts skills. She gets some good action scenes under her belt. She's very believable as a near silent assassin. So it's not the juiciest role to sink your teeth into as far as emotion or showing range. She does have a subplot about a child that she lost that comes up a few times. She does have a few lines of dialogue, but she's getting my Mark Strong Award for the action. I just find it extremely believable, and I'm just a huge fan of Lucy Liu. Part of this, maybe I'm just bringing more to the table because I'm a fan of her work overall. This comes at a pretty interesting time in her career. I mean, this is early on, not early in her career, but early in her big rise to fame. This is like between the two Charlie's Angels movies. Kill Bill's right around the corner, and she's been working steadily ever since then. I love her in everything I see her in. I think she's fantastic. Earlier this year, the family, we watched Home Improvement as our dinner movie. Made our way through that show, and one of her earliest roles is on Home Improvement. She's literally just a woman in the audience at a Tool Time taping, but there she is, Lucy Liu in all her glory. It wasn't until today, researching this movie, that I knew that she plays Watson on that Sherlock Holmes show. Which one? There's so many Sherlock Holmes shows. Which one is she on?
There's two. She's on Elementary.
There's so many of them, Andrew.
She's
on Elementary, which is like 7 seasons. I've never watched it. It's obviously very successful, but I'm very intrigued to see that Lucy Liu as Watson. That's cool.
Here's my hot take. I like that show better than BBC's Sherlock, the one with Benedict Cumberbatch. Because
there's also the movies at the same time. Those 2 shows, but like Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock is 3 people playing Sherlock Holmes in the same era. It's just a lot, Andrew.
Whatever. But I will say this. I think Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, I think that first season really is pretty good and really cements that as being like a thing that people really, really enjoyed. I think as the show goes on, it kind of falls into what I consider to be there is a pitfall of the murder mystery that is quite often happens, and it can happen a lot, and especially some of the stuff that runs for longer. It's when the clues are not there. It's when
obsessed. Like audiences can't figure it out. We got to keep them guessing, and so
right. So in order to hold it back, or they put out information and it's misdirection or anything, and so when I read a mystery novel or I watch a show, I want the clues to solve it to be there. They don't need to be obvious, and sometimes they smack me right in the face and I still don't see them, but they're there. And Sherlock, as it goes on, I think falls increasingly more into the Sherlock is so weird and eccentric. He just knows things, and it's like, well, cool, but it eventually gets to the point where I'm like, this dude's just it full on just feels like he's making stuff up, and then it ends up being true, and it's ridiculous and strange. But so I think as the show goes on, it just starts leaning too hard into the eccentricities of Sherlock and that portrayal of him, and I lose it. Whereas I think Elementary, while not perfect and definitely has a lot more filler episodes because of the nature of what it is, leans into what I think is a little bit better as far as actually detecting and presenting information. Also, Sherlock gets really hung up on Moriarty. The whole first 2 seasons of Sherlock are all about Moriarty. And that's just not who he is in the stories. In the stories, Moriarty shows up in 2 of them. Irene Adler also gets a lot of focus in them, and she shows up in 1 story. So there's these characters that the BBC one just hyper focuses on that Moriarty is obviously a word because he's always seen as Sherlock Holmes, equal / rival, but he's not in that many stories. So anyway, that's my hot take. Elementary better than Sherlock.
Interesting. How's Lucy Liu on Elementary? Is this
She's
cool
good.
casting? Sounds cool. Very cool.
I like it.
How's Lucy Liu in Ecks versus Sever, Andrew?
She's doing exactly what is asked of her.
That's a great way to put it. And let's talk about Antonio Banderas as... Sorry.
Ecks.
Jeremiah Ecks.
Jeremy Ecks.
I don't look at Antonio Banderas. I don't listen to Antonio Banderas talk and think, yeah, Jeremiah. Jeremiah Ecks.
Ecks.
Sorry. Hashtag PP. I love Antonio Banderas. I recently purchased the Mexico trilogy. I think I talked about it in the podcast previously. I'm holding it up to the camera as if people listening can see, but I got it right here next to me.
You talk about some sexy movies, man. Like, this man's been in a few.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Just that cover, Desperado with the sawed-off shotgun. Yeah, I love him in those movies. The Mask of Zorro, we've talked about multiple times.
Also a very sexy movie.
Probably the sexiest movie ever made. That,
my gosh.
yeah, it's an awakening for everyone, for all who watched. He's great, and this is like peak Antonio Banderas, late 90s, early 2000s. Although it does come in a run where that a little rough for his career, because you had the Mask of Zorro in '98, huge hit, but then you have Play It to the Bone, which is a pretty big flop, also starring Lucy Liu, the first time they co-starred. The 13th Warrior, which is another kind of notorious flop. Spy Kids, which is a kids movie, but it makes some money. Original Sin, which is an erotic thriller starring Antonio Banderas and Angelina Jolie. Those two in 2001 in an erotic thriller sounds like something I'm going to want to watch, Andrew, but I'll be honest, I've never heard of this movie until researching for this. So obviously not a huge hit.
Fun fact,
Femme Fatale,
Original Sin is a remake of a Francois Truffaut movie. But just bring it all back full circle.
Why? Who was that? What's the full circle?
I just mentioned him earlier. I mentioned him earlier when talking about Hitchcock. Just don't listen to me at all, do you?
Yeah. I'm gonna be listening to this and editing and being like, oh yeah, he did bring him up. Femme Fatale, another erotic thriller that doesn't make any money, so it's a bit of a dry period for him. But this one doesn't.
Shrek 2 is coming. We all know
it's coming.
Is.
Yeah.
Shrek 2 is on the way, but yeah, it's. The peak of Banderas is probably like that late 90s period, kind of Mask of Zorro, probably his the when he's at the peak of his powers, as far as the combination of everything. And I mean, he's that stuff in here, like Frida was a pretty big critical hit, like, and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, I guess, is 03. So like he's definitely got the kind of fan favorites peppered throughout this, and then obviously he does Shrek 2, which leads him to Puss in Boots, which he's still doing, or at least was as of a couple years ago.
I heard that Puss in Boots movie was like really good. Which have you seen
one?
it? Yeah,
the most yeah.
Oh, they made two of them, right? Is it? So this is
there's one out there that's like yeah, many years ago. It was like 2011, and then I remember they made a new Puss. I was like, what are we doing? And then I watched it, and I was like, well, this was wonderful.
All right, I gotta watch it. Andrew, Ray Park is in this film. He's got to be an alum of the show, right? Ray Park, he's in everything. Have we talked
X-Men.
about Ray Park?
No, we didn't talk about X-Men.
No, he's Toad in the first X-Men. He's in Men in Black.
Did we talk about G.I. Joe?
Not yet, Andrew.
Not yet. He's technically in Mortal Kombat Annihilation. He's a stunt double, but I don't think we talked about him there. Oddly, looking at his filmography, it's a lot thinner than I expected it to be.
I agree. I did the same thing. I clicked on his filmography, and I'm like, huh. I thought for sure. Was he not in... No, that's Scott Adkins. That's Deadpool in X-Men Origins.
The biggest thing I think we would have talked about him, given that we have not yet discussed Star Wars, stay tuned, the biggest thing I think I would associate with him would probably be G.I. Joe. because he does the 2 live action GI Joes in the aughts as Snake Eyes, which everyone was like, "That's awesome casting," and it is awesome casting. But yeah, it's definitely thinner than I expected it to be. I was definitely like, I thought there'd be more here.
I mean, Ray Park is fan favorite is a great way to look at him. I think he's got a very loyal, dedicated following. People like anytime he shows up. He is very good at doing those twists and flips, Andrew. Darth Maul maybe his most high profile, but yeah, Toad, like I said, the first Men in Black. He is a treat anytime he shows up. This is no different. He is one of our villain's main henchmen, so he is battling Ecks and Sever multiple times throughout the movie, leading up to a big showdown that I really enjoy, and we may be talking about pretty soon.
Yeah, I would assume so. And another plus side is he gets to voice himself here, which he doesn't get to do as Darth Maul. No, I actually, he's doing exactly what he needs to do here. I'll probably be talking about him in a little bit in my favorite scenes. But yeah, just henchman number 1, and he's doing perfectly fine job at it.
And Andrew, in that synopsis, I mentioned there is Antonio Banderas' character's wife, who's presumed dead at the beginning of the movie. We find out she's not only alive, but now under a different name and married to the villain. How could this happen? Rain Ecks is her original name. Then she's Vin Gant, played by alum of the show, Talissa Soto. We talked about her way back on Mortal Kombat, where she plays Katana. We covered both Mortal Kombat movies, and she's in both of them, Mortal Kombat Annihilation as well. You would think she would be doing some action here, considering her previous roles, but really gets to set out most of the action. She's more, I don't want to reduce her character to say it's a plot device, but the whole mystery of her death and reappearance is the main draw here. Speaking of sexy people, because we just is the theme of this episode so much. Married to actor Benjamin Bratt. My God, their children are going to rule the world.
I guarantee we made this exact same comment on Mortal Kombat.
Probably. It's like their kids and Ryan Gosling and Eva Mendes, like that. Those are for future world leaders.
Yep.
And of course, there's other actors and characters here we can maybe talk about as we go through the scenes. But Andrew, it's time that we do just that. Let's talk about the scenes of this film. And we're going to start, of course, with the best scene in the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene of Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever?
Well, I am going to be going with one of our fight scenes. Primarily, I'm going to be going with our big final confrontation between Lucy Liu's character Sever and Ray Park's Agent Ross. This is kind of during our big multifaceted conclusion, where a whole bunch of different stuff is happening. This is after Ecks and Sever have essentially unsevered their relationship.
Okay. All right.
Guys, I'm fired. Basically all of the cards are on the table at this point. We know what Gant's done. We know that he's faked both of these people's deaths and made the other think they made Ecks and his wife think the other was dead, and then he married Ecks' wife, and we found out that the kid at the beginning is not Gant's son, it's actually Ecks' son. We find out that Sever used to be an agent for Gant, then he had her whole family killed. Why Gant did this? It's a mystery, folks. But
that kid is going to need so much therapy.
So much. Anyway, as they're kind of fighting through this kind of, I guess this area is basically where Sever hangs out. We get to the point where Ross, Ray Park's character, gets to face Sever one-on-one. And they just have a really kind of pretty cool knockdown, beat-out brawl through this kind of very Ace Chemicals looking facility that she's got here. A whole lot of metal walkways and staircases and stuff. But this is basically just a chance for Lucy Liu to let loose. It's a chance for Ray Park to let loose and do his weird spinning flip kicks through the air a lot, which he loves to do. And it's cool. This is the one fight where I was like, pulled me in immediately. Where I was like, this is cool. They're just letting loose. It goes on for a good amount of time. And they get some yeah, I like it starts. They basically just throw all the guns to the side. They're just like, oh nope, this is going to be
yeah,
a real
like
fight. No guns.
there's this like understood like honor, I guess.
Yeah,
they just toss their guns at the side.
Yeah, just straight up like throw the guns aside and have a real fist fight, and it's cool. I like it a lot. Like I said, you get Lucy Liu kind of to this point. There's been some decent action stuff, but this is again a fight for her to kind of just let loose. And then Ray Park, they've been kind of holding him back the whole movie. This is the moment where he gets to kind of show that this is Ray Park. And so yeah, this is definitely a sequence where I was like, all right, here we go. Should have done a lot more of this.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you 100% on all points, including there should be more of this. This is my favorite scene of the movie because it's just simply Lucy Liu versus Ray Park. It's just these two characters finally come head to head. They have a hand-to-hand fight. There's some knives involved. Apparently, you can use a knife and still keep your honor, but not guns. Okay, I don't make the rules. But it's good. It's genuinely good choreography. I would not be surprised if they both had input on this, considering their history. But it's good. It's engaging. So much of the action in this movie is gun fights, shootouts, car chases, huge, insane flips and stuff. But at the end of the day, two people going toe-to-toe, it happens a few times throughout the movie, are my favorite action scenes. And this is the best of that bunch. They fight their way up a staircase, and then they're over like this, what is that? A pit of lava, whatever, it's the classic like 90s, 80s action trope where the movie has to end in a factory of some sort. But she's able to defeat Ray Park's character with a nice chop to the neck, tosses him down into that vat of whatever, or a grenade gets thrown in and he gets blown to bits. Good stuff. Yeah, I agree. This is my favorite scene. There is another hand-to-hand fight that stands out is Ecks versus Sever on a rooftop. This is like the first time they actually come face to face. They are using guns at first, but then they get disarmed and end up fighting hand to hand, and it's pretty good. But this one, they're going for more like story beats where like they're fighting each other and ending up in holds and like compromising positions. But I just feel like with the Ray Park one, they really just got to like let loose, as you said. So that's it's gonna be the highlight for me for sure. Over on our Discord, Philly Yeatsteak wrote in about this movie and said, the only two things I remembered about this movie were the shot of the sniper falling onto the car, which was a sweet shot, and the fact that they made a first-person shooter game exclusively for the Game Boy Advance based on the movie. Okay, we'll come back to that shot because it is pretty cool. But almost a full year before this movie comes out, a Game Boy Advance game comes out called Ecks versus Sever. It's got like almost like a comic book art style cover of the two characters. It's a first-person shooter on the Game Boy Advance, which sounds like a mess, but it has really good reviews. It's apparently like a very good game. They did release one more game on the Game Boy Advance closer to the movie's release. This one called Ballistic Ecks vs. Sever, just like the movie, not at all confusing. First game, Ecks vs. Sever. Second game, Ballistic Ecks vs. Sever. That one is also pretty well reviewed, but not as highly as that first one. But how does this happen? Like, just like we're like, how did this director end up with this movie? How does that script get changed so much? And no credit to the new writer. How do they get a deal for a Game Boy Advance game of all things? And it's developed so far ahead of the movie that it comes out like 8 months before it's released. Wild.
I don't know, dude. There's a lot of questions there that I just don't have the answers to. It's apparently apparently the game actually did have to kind of run with some of the changes that they were making to the script in real time too. So like the game is basically being made while that script is being rewritten essentially. And that's kind of nuts to me. Like it's kind of insane that that's how you managed to pull that off. But I don't know. It's wild. Because you would assume that like the title Ballistic Ecks vs. Sever sounds like a video game. Like it's literally a video game
100%.
title. And so, like, I always kind of assumed that's what it was. No, the games are based off of the movie that at that point wasn't it. You talk about a multimedia franchise, like we're going to put out a video game, we're going to put out a show, we're going to put out a movie. Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever got there first, folks.
On eBay, you can get this game for $15 to $25. Cartridge only. If you want the box, of course, it's always more. There is an unopened copy, sealed copy for $140 shipping from Japan if you really want to go all out. But Andrew, I might grab this game because I've heard so much about it. I gotta check it out. I will keep everybody posted.
You don't have to check it out, Chris.
I have to.
Need
I have
this.
Andrew, I have to do this. What do you think about the other shot Philly East State brings up? The sniper falling off the roof.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. And I had read his comment on the Discord before watching this movie, so I was like looking for it. I was like, oh, okay, it's happening. And my note was like, how did they do this? So the shot is the sniper's at the top of a building. Lucy Liu's character shoots a rocket at him, knocks him off, and he falls to his death onto the top of a car. I presume he dies. The camera follows him down on the fall. They're falling together. You know what? The Fall Guy. Did we talk about that during this episode, or was that before we hit record? We talked about it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me a lot of the first stunt in that movie.
Yeah.
Like a fall with the camera following him.
The one where he breaks his back, yeah.
Yeah. I'm guessing that's how they did it, just on wires, and then they edited the wires out, but I don't make too dramatic. I've never seen a shot quite like it. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Definitely stood out, visually interesting, and it just sticks with him. Like any other action movie, especially even at the time, would have made 7 cuts on that fall of he goes from up to the side, back to up, down to below, back to up again, just violating the 180-degree rule at every possible turn, and then crashes into the car. And then they would definitely smash cut to a side shot of the car showing all the glass exploding out of the windows. I appreciated just letting it linger. This
movie is so 2002.
Very.
So 2002. I don't mean it's an insult. I just mean it's clearly from that era. An era we've visited many times on this podcast, and we do this every time. We're like, you know what? 2000, 2005, very distinct. We're all living in a post-Matrix world, and there's, you look through like the Wikipedia citing all kinds of stuff that the studio wanted this to be like the Matrix. Hence the marketing, hence that poster that maybe think could be sci-fi, hence the nanobot subplot, and the music, this techno-based music. No matter what the action scene is, it's always a techno score, or this straight up they have Crystal Method's Name of the Game play whenever the son is getting kidnapped in the beginning. Ooh, it's so 2002, baby. The opening credits, the way they fly onto the screen and fly back off, which is something that's a default setting in any video editing program today. Cutting edge at the time, man. And then whenever it says Ballistic, Ecks versus Sever, when that flies off the screen, there's an airplane in the shot, and it makes a jet noise, shoom, as the credits fly off.
Yeah.
And yeah, it makes a Peter Griffin sound. My favorite scene starring your Mark Strong Award winner is probably after his son is kidnapped. His security detail, there's one man left standing, and he confronts them, and he tells this long, dramatic, scene-chewing story about how in medieval times, if a knight disappointed the king, he would fall on his own sword, literally take himself out. So he hands a gun to this man and says, "Do the honorable thing." And the man, clearly shaken, takes the gun. He holds it up to his temple, and I'm like, come on, dude. You're just gonna kill your... he handed you the gun. And the man does what I'm thinking. He points the gun at our villain, pulls the trigger, and this gun fires backwards. The bullet flies out the back of the gun, hits him right between the eyes. He falls to the floor dead. I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, if I'm watching the movie wrong, I'm like, this is still an extremely dangerous thing to pull off. What if this guy knows about your little trick? What if you heard about it before? What if he turns around? Or what if he pulls the trigger and the bullet grazes his ear and it's not happening pointing straight at his brain? But from a movie standpoint, from an enjoying the ride standpoint, I'm like, you know what? That was pretty creative and a fun way to show how maniacal this villain is.
Yeah, it's great. It's very just, very super villain, very just it's the kind of thing that you would expect a James Bond villain to do, just have that kind of ace up the sleeve where, he the idea that, of course, the guy that he asked to kill himself is going to try to kill him instead, and boom, it's done anyway. But yeah, this was probably the moment where I was like, all right, I'm into this. This guy knows what's up, and yeah, it works.
I kind of like, maybe respect the fact that, I mean, the movie's called Ballistic, right? They're telling you exactly what you're in for. It's high octane action, lots of shootouts, lots of car chases, like plenty of that throughout the movie. But the climax to this movie, we've learned about this nano robot that you can inject in someone's bloodstream, and with the push of a button, it gives them a heart attack. Essentially, it stops their heart. And that is our climax of the movie. It's Sever has retrieved the nanorobot from his son, who we used to smuggle this robot into the country, and seemingly implanted it in Gant without him knowing. And the big face-off between Sever and our villain, who's responsible for the death of her child, is Sever pushes a button, and Gant has a heart attack and falls dead. That's the big climax. I kind of like it for a few reasons. One, the acting. I mean, man, he earned that Mark Strong award. The fact that it's like, all right, robot gave you a heart attack, and he's just like almost mid-sentence grabs his chest and shows his pain and falls dead. Andrew, imagine for a second that there was no nano-robot side plot, and at the end of this movie, our villain just happens to have a heart attack at an inopportune time, and that's how it ends.
Oh man, yeah, this is another good smarmy scene from the villain. Lucy Liu shoots him in the arm, and he's like you said, all that training for that, and she goes, nah, for this, and presses the age-old late 90s, early 2000s key fob from your Toyota that set off every bit of technology in the world. The technology, like the gun that is supposed to extract the nanorobot, but it turns red because the nanorobot's not in there. It looks like a Men in Black gun, little silver gun. There's a voice recorder that is used to prove Antonio Banderas' wife is still alive, and that looks like a it's this early 2000s gadget, like key fob, but the big old play button, but it sounds like a talk boy whenever he hits play. I genuinely love it. Like, just, you go back and you look at artistic interpretations of what future technology would be like, and it's, hindsight's 2020. It's obviously usually pretty off, but it's fun to go back to for sure. Yep.
Andrew, I sort of running theme for this month, right? Has been like whether or not it makes sense to us that the movie has 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I think last week, Problem Child was the first time I was like, I kind of get it. Like, this has some tone problems, kind of mean-spirited. Like, I get it. And Ecks versus Sever has its problems. I'm not at all surprised it's panned by critics. I'm still a little surprised, though, that it's 0%. If not just because it's almost 120 reviews. I mean, out of all of those reviews, not one person could give it a thumbs up, especially since it has, at the very least, you see, even movies with like trouble with the plot, you'll see like, but it's got style, it's slick, it's got action scenes, it's got something where they're like, well, at least it has this, and they give it at least like a mediocre review, but it's enough for a thumbs up. I'm surprised still not one of those slipped through, but only one. I wouldn't be surprised if it was one, but I am surprised that nobody gave this a positive review.
Yeah, I am a little surprised. It's the kind of thing where, like you said, you figured somebody would have just been like, yeah, the cheesy action's right up my alley or whatever, but it is nuts. I did not realize the sample size was that large, and you would have assumed at least one person would have been like, yeah, this was fun. I wonder if somebody were to try to give it a positive review now, if they would be stopped so that it's preserved. Like, Rotten Tomatoes is like, no, we're not letting you mess this up.
Yeah, like if you're now a certified critic, if you just wanted to go back and... There's people that do that for good movies, like mutual friend Doug was very annoyed. I don't remember the name. There's like one specific...
Armand White.
Basically, troll critic. You know who I'm talking about? Like, they ruined the 100% for like Toy Story 3. Like, they would specifically go to like 100% movies and give them a bad review. And it was clearly they just wanted to be the one person to give it a bad review.
It wasn't 100%, yeah. No, Armand White is just a very notorious contrarian reviewer. I think he gave Jonah Hex a positive review, but gave Toy Story 3 a bad review. Like, it's something where when you look at how he reviews things, it's hard not to feel that it's just all on purpose. But,
yeah,
whatever.
Should there be a hashtag PP version of this where they just lift every movie because there's something we're celebrating in every film?
I don't know. Sure.
I don't want to put my name on this.
Guys, I gotta go.
Andrew, we made it. We made it through 0% month. As I said, it's almost like what our podcast was building to since the beginning. But we will continue. We're heading into a new month, October, which of course means a brand new theme. And you know what it is. It's spooky season. We've done slashers before and horror movies. We're going to keep it spooky. Specifically, we will be discussing movies about ghosts. Ghost movies. Most of these movies are going to be
Spooky.
Horror films. But it's broad enough that we might be able to sneak something in there that is ghost related, but maybe not the first thing you think of for an October film.
As opposed to being like a horror movie, you could say that this movie might make you feel good instead. But yeah.
Many things make you feel good, Andrew.
Yes, but this one is about something that in particular is supposed to, as stated by the song of the same name.
Okay. Yeah, we got it. Andrew, it's going to kick off next week with House on Haunted Hill, the remake from the early 2000s. A movie I've seen multiple times, haven't seen in a long time. Excited to revisit that one.
You clearly haven't seen it in a long time because it's from the late 90s.
Blast. 99?
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, it was almost the early 2000s. But yeah, you're right. I have not seen it in a long time, so I'll be revisiting that next week. Ghosts all month long. Tell your friends. And join us in our Discord server if you haven't already. This podcast, look, thank you for listening. I love every one of you for tuning in, for downloading, whether it's on your podcast catcher or on YouTube. Thank you. This is like half the content. Maybe it's more than half. This is like 75% of the content. To get the full experience, you got to be in that Discord server. Hang out in the community. Talk about nerdy stuff. Talk about films, whether we've covered it or not. Talk about new releases that you've seen. Talk about comic books. Andrew, recently someone asked you for a recommendation because they're getting into the Dread comics. You're able to hop in and help them out. And just celebrate positivity with us around the clock. It's free to join Discord. Don't be intimidated. Don't be scared. Click that link in the show notes. It's there.
Yeah. Also, Judge Dredd Complete Case Files, Volume 1. It's really straightforward.
Is that in print? Is it hard to find?
They're all in print.
Okay, good deal. Just I say this all the time. I'm bad. I should be plugging this stuff more often. But, we have a store. If you want some Best of the Rest merch, if you want our cool logo on a t-shirt or tank top or a baseball style shirt, that's the one that I have. Get it on a mug. You can do that on our store on TeePublic. Again, there's a link there in the show notes. We appreciate, like I said, appreciate you listening. If you want to do anything extra, you've got options, and we would love to have you. Come back next week for House on Haunted Hill. And in the meantime, just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can find him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for his SoundCloud link. Again, check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And of course, if you enjoyed this show, please share it with a friend, because that is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.